Okay, and for your second video today, we're going to go over the required CTE for this week. Now, the discussion is not mandatory this week, even though if you do it, you need to have that top post in by Thursday. But the CTE for this week is, because this is going to be the first CTE that you have to do, because we need to learn how to do this primary source analysis thing. So here are the instructions for the CTE. Using the required readings for this week, which include the same ones that you would have if you decide to do the discussion as well. Locke and Wright's Colliding Cultures, both from the textbook and from the American Yelp Reader. Lepore's The Nature of the Past, which is particularly important to understand for doing this particular CTE. And the multimedia component of your choice. So it's the same sources you would be using for the discussion. You're going to first go to this site, the University Writing and Speaking Center, which is going to explain to you how to read a primary source. So I've already got it up, and we're going to look at it right now. All right. What is a primary source? Which you should know already. It is a direct first-hand account that describes a particular time period or event. Examples of these include things like books or memoirs or autobiographies, journals, journal articles, newspaper articles, laws, memos, diary entries, etc. All of these things that were produced by someone living in the past, recording basically what was either happening to them or happening around them, or what was going on at the particular point in time that they're writing about. The difference between a primary and a secondary source is that secondary sources analyze events from a future perspective. Or as it says here, a primary source comes directly from an individual who experienced the event or time period. Secondary sources analyze, synthesize, interpret, or evaluate the time period event through primary sources. Secondary sources are effectively filtered, as in they're using multiple different sources to try to get some sort of idea or prove some kind of theory about that particular time period or event. So the way you go about doing a primary source is, before you read it, you want to consider when the source was written and published, who the author of the source is, what is their background. That doesn't mean just give me a name. It means tell me something about them. What was the historical context of this source? What was going on in the world when the source was written? As in, what's the big event, if it is about a big event, or what is literally going on in the world at this time? What type of primary source is it? Is it a diary, a newspaper article, a letter, a journal entry, a grocery list? What kind of source is it? What do I already know about the topic? As in, what do you already know? And what do I need to learn about the topic in order to put this primary source into context? So before you read a primary source that you're going to analyze, you want to consider these questions first. Then while you're reading the source, you want to consider what was going on in the author's mind when they wrote it. Was the author writing with a specific goal in mind, or were they writing to document their own experiences? And this again goes to that whole construct of bias or perspective, and answering the question of why this person wrote the source, who were they writing it to, and how does that infuse the information that they include in it? Is the author aware of the importance of their text? For example, it's highly unlikely that Anne Frank knew that her diary would be published and have immense historical significance. Understanding this will influence your understanding of the text. Are they, again, basically writing it for themselves? Are they writing it to share with someone in particular? Who is the audience? How does that affect the information that's in it? And are there any assumptions made by the author that do not make sense to a modern audience? And this is a bias thing or a perspective thing. I often call this the point at which you're uncomfortable. If you're reading something from the past, the odds are there's going to be some mention of slavery, or there's going to be some mention of taking human life for granted in some capacity, or social roles and expectations that we don't adhere to today. Things that make you feel uncomfortable are places that you should notice how the world was for the person writing this and how that influences them. All right, so those are the things you want to consider while you're reading the source. And then after you've read the source, you want to consider how the perspectives and knowledge put forth by the author of the text compare to what you know as a modern reader. As in, do we know more things today about that time period than he possibly or she possibly did at the time they wrote it, which is often the case. Is there anything that makes this source less credible or believable? Are there any inconsistencies in this source? By inconsistencies, we mean, do they say one thing in one place and then say something directly opposite to it somewhere else? Do they take some things for granted, but not other things that it seems like they should? These are inconsistencies, and you want to observe that because it does mean that they're either not being true to themselves or they're not being true to the audience. What questions can this source help me answer? What does it not answer? And probably the what does it not answer is even more important than what does it answer. Was this source an accurate reflection of the time period in which it was written? If not, how was it not, and how do you know it's not? And this is where we often find, again, those inconsistencies, the things that don't seem right. What did you learn about the time period or event that the author was writing about? As in, what knowledge of this, in the broader sense, did this writing give you? All right, so your exercise for CTE 3 is to consider these questions and to answer them as you pick a source from the American Yawp Reader to analyze. So what you're going to do is you're going to answer the first set of questions before you read that source. Then you're going to read that source and answer the second set of questions. And then after you've read that source, you're going to consider what you know about that time period and answer the third set. And you'll be using, particularly in the first section and the third section, your information from the American Yawp textbook itself, from Lepore, and from your multimedia source. Then you can use, obviously you'll be using quotes and examples from the primary source you choose for answering the second set of questions. But you're also going to you can also then use your textbook to help you with those or multimedia or even Lepore if it works for that. All right, so this is your mandatory primary source analysis, your critical thinking exercise for week 3. As I said, it is mandatory. You must do it. It is due by Saturday night, so you want to go ahead and get started on that as soon as possible. And it is posted. It is under the Assignments tab. I'll show you where it is, which is under Activities. Activities Assignments right here. And it is CTE Week 3 Primary Source Analysis. All right, so go ahead and get started on that. If you choose to do the discussion, that's fine. If you choose not to, it will become one of your dropped discussion grades. And I will start getting those discussion grades back to you in the near future. I promise. In fact, actually, I thought I already had one of them back to you, but I'll be getting the others back to you as soon as I can. All right. Thank you. And if you have any questions, email me.